Well, Michael Blake, always good to see you,
Good to see you
man.
as well, my friend.
You're a busy man, and I know now more so than ever
Yeah,
with everything that's going on.
sure.
But wanted to just kind of talk with you.
Yeah,
First of all, to get folks to know who Michael Blake is. You've got some humble beginnings, and you've
sure.
reached some, I mean, real high heights here.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit
Still
about,
climbing, still
yeah,
trying to
still
climb.
climbing,
Yeah,
yeah. But talk a little bit about Michael
sure.
Blake for me.
Absolutely. Michael Blake, born here in Charleston. I work at the Sanctuary Hotel. I've been with the company now about 23 years. I think what makes it, a unique company is where I started. I came in as a steward, busboy, and became a waiter, and became a junior manager, department head, and in the last 3 years, I've been promoted to director of food and beverage. So I use that as a story that keeps me motivated, but it also helps out in the community where I'm at and talking to young men and women about how I got there. And there was no recipe for it, and no one said, "Oh, I'm going to just promote him," just because there's certain things that need to be done in order to get it.
Right.
There's a certain foundation that needs to be done in order to get there, and I think that is an asset that I have that I love to share with people, and especially young men and women that are in high school or just all weary. They don't know where they want to go because even though I've been around working in a 5-star hotel, those were not my beginnings.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And so I have I think diversity to be able to see where I grew up, where I come from, and the family and friends, and seeing the struggles and seeing the trials and tribulations versus working in a 5-star property and just enjoying some of the benefits that come along with that, and being able to travel the world as well. So I have a different perspective, a different lens.
Yeah.
And I think it's a value that I try to, as much as I can, I try to give back, and I try to share with whoever wants to listen.
Yeah, and so that's great because that's kind of leads us into what we want to talk about for a little
Sure.
bit as well. Also, because as you were saying, you've got a wide reach
Sure.
with folks, and we've got a lot that's happened the last couple of weeks,
Sure.
and not only here in our beloved city of Charleston, but across the nation, where we saw the protests that were going
Sure.
on after the murder of George Floyd, and protest. To me, protesting is good. It's a peaceful protesting.
Absolutely.
I say that is the best. So when we talk about the young kids, it seems like some that you saw were as young as 17, 18 years old,
Sure.
but it's a complete younger generation that are that are out and they're protesting. What can you share as far as
Sure.
what you have done and your path to success to kind of to speak to racial
Sure.
equality and
Absolutely.
and advancement?
Sure. So I was part of a program. I'm part of a program called Teach the Need. At one point, we were in 8 Title I schools, and a lot of the inner city schools. And every semester, I would go and meet young men and women, and a lot of them were young men and women of color. And just taking the time, I show up and I got on a suit, and so did they get a little interested, like, who's this guy? And I think what really hooks them in is when I say I sat in this chair. I went to high school here. I had friends that went here. I'm from this area. So then you get them to start to listen a little bit. And then from there, you talk about the fundamentals and the basics. Because everyone wants to talk about, the job, right? And how to do the job. But the most important part is how do they get the job? How do they get that opportunity? The soft skills, right? So imagine, going into an inner city school, and you go in your first day of class, and most of these students have zero idea why they're there, right? So they walk in, and all of a sudden you see this guy, and he holds out his hand to shake your hand. And they give me like this fake kind of little limp handshake, and they're looking off in the corner, they can't look you in the eye, and they're timid, and they don't want to speak. But imagine week 7, I'm handing the certificate to them, and they're shaking hands, and they're looking you in the eye, and they're getting the confidence. They've done a mock interview, so when they go on a real interview, they'll get that job. Now imagine if you're hiring, and all of a sudden, a 17, 18-year-old student sends you an email thanking you for your time, right? Because it's all about an opportunity.
Yeah.
For that one job, right, that could change somebody's life, there's another 50, 100 people looking for that same job. So I think the start is the fundamentals, the soft skills, teaching them the handshake, the eye contact, some of those skills, and then get the job. And then from there, right, it can kind of lend on to, okay, how is the training going to be? I sit back and I say to myself, I don't want to be just the best African American director of food and beverage. I want to be the best at what I do. And if I change gears and do something else, I want to be the best at that. So it starts with self-confidence first, and we teach that with Teach the Need. So it's very important to do that, and it's great to go out there and protest, but when it's all said and done, it's up to the individual to make a difference.
Yeah, and so and I guess with your program there, it kind of shows them that you've got skin in the game.
Absolutely.
It's like, hey, I've been there.
If I can do, and I made mistakes, right? I've done things in my past, but it tells them that if I can do it, they can do it, and that's very important. And I see it all the time. I was at a restaurant here in Charleston, and I was feeling down a couple of days ago when I went to a local restaurant here in Charleston to see a good friend of mine. And a young man walked up to me, and he had the mask on. I didn't know who he was at first, but he said, Mr. Blake, 3 years ago I took your class. And he's in college. He's working on the weekends and playing football for South Carolina State. So to me, it's like, all right, I needed that to hear that. And he took advantage of that opportunity. Because you're going to get opportunities. It's not a handout, but you need to take advantage of the opportunities.
Sure.
And he did that, and it just made me proud. And I mean, it's just one of those things where you need that encouragement to keep going.
That's right. Yeah. So when we talk about the protesting, we'll stay on that for a minute too, and the young folks are out there, and I think we want to see them, protesting. Peaceful protesting is good, but what are some of the things that you think that you can tell them words of encouragement to work towards that goal of what they really want to do, and then exactly what it is that they can do now. And it's not necessarily that all of the protesting has to be in the form of being out in the streets,
Correct.
But there are other ways. So what kind of
Absolutely.
advice?
Number one, like I said before, start with yourself. We got to vote, right? We got to get out and vote. We got to get out and do these things that's going to make a difference, that's going to make an impact, but ultimately make the right decision, right? So often people wait until they get convicted of a crime or wait until there's an issue before wanting to make a difference, right? Make the right decision now. Right, and be able to be smart about what you're doing and who you're with. You got to be able to put people in your life that want to help you succeed, and eliminate threats and people in your life that are going to hinder you from succeeding. So I think that's the biggest thing from a culture standpoint that I found myself having to deal with a lot. And it's just people say things like, "Oh, you've come up and you've moved." No, it's not the case. Right. It's not the case, and it's okay to want better. It's okay to want more. It's okay to not following the path of friends and family sometimes, because it's just an opportunity to make the right decision, and you got to take advantage of that.
Now, the young ones that are saying, they're not listening. They being the older folks, the leaders, the politicians, they're not listening. What is it on that side that we, as the older generation, the leaders and all, what is it that we have to do to kind of walk to that line so we can be face to face to?
Well, I think the challenges are a little different, right? And my mom always said, God gave you 2 ears, 1 mouth for a reason. Sometimes you got to listen. And I think sometimes you want to start doing things and you're not really listening what some of the challenges are to somebody that's, it could be a 25, 30-year disparity, right? So what are some of the things that they can do? I would say number one, come together and discuss, listen, talk about it, right? And then from there, put an action plan in place. Because I like talking, but when you're done, you got to put a plan in place. You got to follow up. You got to have action plans. I feel that if you're that 20-something-year-old, you can learn from somebody from the next generation, and vice versa as well. So you got to be able to come together first, find that common equality, and then move on and move forward. But I think that sometimes I feel like they're saying the same thing, but the language is different. Does that make sense? Like they're saying, I can say something in Spanish, you say it in English. We're saying the same thing, but it's just the fact that you've got to break it down. I got to translate it for you, and you got to translate it for me.
And sometimes it's like talking over each other.
Exactly.
And do you think, because I think for me a lot of times it's almost like the elders expect for it, well, no, they should listen to us, but sometimes it takes the elders listening to them for us to move forward.
Absolutely. It takes a village to raise a child, right? So it takes all these things. Can you imagine some of the tech savviness, right, along with some of the wisdom that comes with from the other generation? There can be so much that can be accomplished. But again, it has to be that listening. It has to be that. And respect is one thing. Right, and respect is a two-way street, right? You got to give it to get it, and sometimes I think there's so much friction early on that they're never going to get to that common goal. You got to set aside preconceived notions, set aside what happened last year, set aside something that's going to hinder where you want to go, and you got to all be on one accord.
And we know racial inequality exists.
Sure.
What is that path to, even for these young ones, to get to this, to see that racial equality between young, older generation? What is it going to take for I guess, us to understand and get to that racial equality?
You know, if you're a good human being, you're a good human being. There's no doubt in my mind. I'm a 240-pound black man, right? I don't slink in anywhere, sneak in anywhere. It's who I am, right? But I say that to say I'm proud of who I am, right? And I've got a good perspective on things. I grew up, like I said before, in some of the roughest areas of Charleston, and I work at this great hotel now, right? So I think in order to bridge that gap with other people, it's just we have to be able to, be smart about it, right? We have to be able to communicate very well. We have to be able to understand people's pain. Like I said, sometimes people start talking, but they're not listening what some of the challenges are. And I tell my friends all the time, they'll assume that I come to work every day and I smile, that I'm not a black man, right? I go through trials and tribulations myself, and there's things that are done unfairly to me, right? But I know that I have people in my life like them to help me understand. But just imagine if somebody doesn't have somebody in their life, and every time they interact with a certain person, right, whether it be a police officer, whether it be at a bank, somewhere, they cannot change their mindset. You can't start labeling a race of people based on a few interactions. I've been blessed, you've been blessed to see a multitude of interactions, so our lens isn't skewed, but to some people their lens is a little skewed right now because that's all that they've seen. So it starts with just, like I said, looking in the mirror and becoming a better human being. Not saying that because who I am, right? I expect people to smile when I smile, but just know in life you're gonna have obstacles, and that's all it is. But never let the bad outweigh the good.
When you look at, because we were talking, and I said this was my first time driving down King Street since everything happened, and you likewise with you. How does it make you feel?
It hurts. It hurts because I know that I can pick up the phone and call any one of those restaurateurs and get someone a job, right? And it's almost like you're hurting sometimes a place that might have given somebody a job, and you're hurting that person that can't come into work, right? But on the other side too, like people are angry, people are upset, they're frustrated, right? And now that we need to move past this. But I say this to someone: if you're more upset, right? If you're more upset about damage to a building, right, versus damage to who we are as human beings, and the killing of anybody, right? But really, right now, of people of color, right? You've got a problem. You've got a problem if you can't understand it. And unfortunately, George Floyd is the first person that they think this happened to, but it's not. I can give you, we can stay here for hours talking about the different scenarios, the different situations, right? But that doesn't change my perception of somebody that's my friend, that's white, blue, black, or orange. It doesn't change that mindset. But we've got to remember that we're all one race. But right now, we've got to eliminate this problem. It's not about civilians versus police officers. It's about the people of this world against people that are racist. That's the issue.
So it's like putting it in perspective.
You got to put it in perspective, and it absolutely hurts. It just, I see it, and it bothers me, and I don't want to say that got some people's attention, but if you look around the world, we're not the only place that's protesting.
Right.
I saw London, I saw China, and all these other nations that are protesting. So if you've lived in the South your whole life and you don't think there's a problem, and people in China see there's a problem, you've got to start to put two and two together and figure this out, because we've got some problems we need to work on.
You're right. When we look down the road, 5, 10, 15 years from now, what are you hoping to see?
I'm already seeing changes within 5 days. Right, you talk about some of the things that have been going on, the removal of the Confederate flag. I'm seeing police officers joining hands and hugging with protesters. That's what it takes. Those are the things, right? I look at the video of the two kids that are in the park in New York City, and they run and they hugged. Racism is something that's taught. So if we can eliminate that, I think that's the most important part, to eliminate that and bridge the gap. Right? Bridge the gap. We all think that we've got friends and but invite their friend over for dinner one day. Like, that's the thing that's going on. You can't just be a friend at work. You can't just be a friend when you see them in the gym. There's more to a friendship There's more to getting to understanding, getting to know somebody, because you'll be surprised. We have very similar issues, right? Very similar problems, and very similar positives as well.
Right.
So it's just gonna take some time, but we're heading in a great direction, and I'm proud of what I'm seeing in the city that I call home.
So it sounds like a lot of this is going to boil down to communication, understanding,
Correct.
and having
And
empathy.
empathy, and then valuing as well, and awareness. I think that's the biggest thing. That it's just the awareness and knowing, right? And some people they get enlightened because they start reading about something now, because they're enlightened because now you turn on the news and it's on.
Yeah.
So now they're becoming enlightened, and then you start researching, you start thinking, you're like, whoa. So now somebody that thought that there wasn't a problem now realizes there's a problem. And you and I know, in order to fix the problem, you got to first identify that there is a problem.
That's right. And that's
And
number one.
Once you identify there's a problem, you can work towards fixing systemic racism.
Wow. As we wrap up, I was asking some of the others, and I'll ask you the same question to kind of repeat and complete it. When we're thinking about, again, looking ahead to, a lot of this is going to involve us being hopeful. So if you had to say it, you said, I am hopeful for, or I'm hopeful that. What do you
I am hopeful that I don't have to have this discussion with my son again, right? He's 10 years old, and I had a discussion with him about race, right? Because he doesn't see race. He's got friends of all colors. So I'm hopeful that I never have to have a discussion with my son again about race, and he sees people for who they are and not by the color of their skin. That's my hope. And I hope that his son one day never has to even have that conversation at all.
Doable?
That's my hope.
Is it doable?
I think it is. But it starts now. It starts now. And you got to have those tough conversations. But it begins now.
Well, we're glad to have you, man,
Sure,
to be
it's
a
a
part of
pleasure.
the conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, buddy.
Appreciate it.
All
Thank you.
righty.
Thank
Okay.
you.